Welcome back to Pause, Stop, Reset. Today, I'm joined by a friend who really needs no introduction at any time at all in the worlds of online business, marketing, or audience building. This is the one and only Ryan Levesque. Now, Ryan is a 7-time Inc. 5000 CEO fan. I'm reading his bio here. Second time, #1 best-selling author. Generated over $100 million in revenue, sold 2 companies successfully, and his work featured in the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Entrepreneur. He has been there and done everything for ages. He is the guy, and he's really humble as well. And he's a strategic advisor to multiple businesses. His new book's coming out soon. And he's an email to call The Digital Contrarian with sort of really different business wisdom to over 100,000 subscribers. He's a master of asking questions, thinking, and being a good guy. And I think without further ado, Ryan, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, Simon, that was such a kind introduction. I'm really looking forward to our conversation here today.
Well, I am too, because you're one of I've been on online marketing now for over 2.5 decades, right? And some of the people you see online and you get to meet them and you go, And some of the people you meet and you go, I want to spend more time with you. You're one of those guys. And then when I met you in London, there was no ego, no who you could have been. And you brought a groundness and a reality and sort of ethical business ethos to what I think's got missed in the modern world. So we may get into that a little bit. But let's start at the beginning. So anybody listening, Ryan, going, who is this guy, Ryan? What does he do? So who is Ryan Levesque and what is he up to today?
I think I'm probably best known in the industry as the author of a book called Ask, which is a book about all about understanding your market at a deep emotional level. The writing of that book led to creation of a company, and that led to the creation of a software business that we sold in 2024. And that's ultimately what brought you and I together in London at an event where we were celebrating that merger, that transaction in London. And it sort of led me into this new chapter of life. And this new chapter of life, what I kind of define as my second mountain, is definitely one that's taken me in a very interesting direction. And I find myself with my family living on a farm in rural Vermont, where we raise and grow most of the food that we eat as a family. And today I spend a lot of my time writing and serving as an advisor to a handful of CEOs and entrepreneurs who are looking to do some of what I've been able to do in my career. So that's the 30-second version.
Yeah, I love it. I'll give a shout out to Dan. This is Daniel Priestley with ScoreApp. I remember when I read about that merger, I was like, how did this happen? Because you've been people in sort of 2 separate worlds of mine. Alex Mendoza, I know from the old days, was sort of in the Ask pages. And so this sort of American marketing, British Australian marketing coming together. And I'm really excited for where it may go with that. Dan's taking off on podcasts. I'm sure I can see the influence of Ryan in the mothership there. So Dan, if you're watching, we love you and glad it's going well. I met Dan, honestly, like 15, 20 years ago. When he was doing other stuff. And that's where this sort of reset bit comes in. So that's really the next question we'll lead into. Apart from the company exits and that stuff, but what have been the big sort of pause, stop, resets, the shifts you've been into from baby Ryan to daddy Ryan? What are the big roller coaster switches you've been through?
It's a great question. And, to answer your question, I think one of the things that's marked my career as I look back in hindsight is that I've not been afraid to pursue resets at key milestones in my life. So if I go way back to university, I studied neuroscience, and I thought I was going to go to medical school and become the next great neurologist or neurosurgeon. And I ended up not going in that direction, became really fascinated in psychology and specifically consumer psychology and the psychology of capital markets, which led me to work on Wall Street. And while I was on Wall Street, I realized that I had this desire, this fire in me to go on an adventure. And at the time, that adventure was to move and live in Asia. And I gave up this very promising career on Wall Street to pursue a career living and working in China. At university, I also studied Mandarin Chinese, and I became really fascinated in the Chinese culture. So my wife and I lived and worked in China for about 5 years. And again, a very promising career in that direction as a bilingual English, Chinese, Mandarin, Chinese speaking professional. And in 2008, decided to give all that up and start my own business. So we donated everything that we owned at the time, and except for 2 suitcases, and I started a business of all things, teaching people how to make Scrabble tile jewelry online.
Of course you did, right? That's what you do, right?
It's natural, right? And for me, it was a practice business in many ways. It wasn't like my forever business, but it was a practice business to really learn the world of online marketing, digital marketing, how to build a website, how to build an email list, how to create digital products, and just sort of the dynamics of that and running your own business. And that led me to go into a number of different markets, 23 different markets, eventually write a book about the process that I'd followed, which became the number one best-selling book in the country. Inc. magazine rated it their number one marketing book of the year, Ask. That led me to create a company around that, teaching people how to implement this and consulting with businesses. That then led us to build a technology business, which we talked about, that led to the sale. And then at the sort of height of that, I realized I'd spent really the last decade of my life at this point in empire building mode, singularly focused, saying no to almost all things in life, just really tunnel vision on this. And I had a milestone birthday. I turned 40 and kind of had this moment of reflection around, well, I spent the first 40 years of my life optimizing for a life built around a screen. And do I want to spend the next 40 years of my life doing the same thing? And the answer was no. I want to spend the next 40 years of my life with more time with my hands in the dirt, not my face in front of a screen. So that led me to the decision to sell our business, to move to Vermont, to start a farm, and to pursue this new direction. So between making a shift from neuroscience to Wall Street to China, China to Scrabble tile jewelry to the multiple businesses we'd started along the way, to then shifting to regenerative farming and living a life optimized around really family and what I describe as the unscalable. I don't think I've been afraid to make major shifts in my life along the way. And we can talk more about that because I've spent a lot of time really thinking about that, unpacking that. So I'd say reset is something that I've been able to do relatively well. Yeah. Where I've struggled in my life, I think a lot more so, is deciding what to stop. I'm a polymath, a lot of interests. Pursue a lot of different academic disciplines. Not one of these people that could ever imagine having just one track in life and achieving mastery in an infinitesimally small domain. All these interests, from language acquisition to neuroscience to finance and investing to business to now regenerative farming. And these are pursuits that I think are all very fascinating to me. And I struggle at times to know what I need to turn off in my life to make room for what's next. Yeah. So trying to juggle too many things, spin too many plates, that's something that I'm still learning. I think it'll be a lifelong pursuit for me to improve in that area.
Well, and it's funny enough, it's part of where, when we sort of spoke in London sort of privately a bit, it's what I think is going to happen more and more challenging in the business world. We have a similar, but different sides into it. My background was sort of mathematics and then human psychology, ontology, and then systems and marketing and business, and this very weird eclectic life. But today, you and I know what works in marketing now almost certainly won't work in 5 years in the tactical level, right? And where we're going with AI and system bots. So this thing of what to prioritize, what to stop, the farming gives you a reality check. You plant the wrong things, it doesn't work, you have to reset. The world of life and business used to be a bit more forgiving, I think. Even our chance meeting was sort of semi-chance meetings. And I think this thing of where to prioritize and where to stop will be less obvious when, and you, how old is your youngest child now, if that makes sense? You're sort of...
My baby, my youngest right now is turning 11, about to turn 11.
So when you, with all your experience, look when they're 18, you know what, you need to learn this, and yes, and don't bother with this, and this. I don't have an answer. So this question of the core skills you need to survive and thrive in the future. So very clear about that stopping. And I was just curious, before we go on, growing up before that sort of university and the banking career, were you also going through shifts and resets, or was it sort of a stable childhood in one place, or nomadic, or what was that like?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I grew up in a working class household. So neither of my parents went to college or university. My dad he's retired now, but he was a shipping clerk. So we loaded boxes on the back of a truck, basically his entire life, worked nights most of his life. My mom was a hairdresser. So she cut hair for a living. First in my family to go to college. Definitely had times in my life where I wondered, how did I land in this family? Like, it was just not, I didn't necessarily identify with a lot of that upbringing. But I had a very stable upbringing, meaning my dad worked for the same organization his entire life. My mom did the same thing her entire life. They got married in the house that they moved into, that I grew up in, that they
Wow.
still live in this day, 50 years later. They've lived their entire adult lives in that house. Literally, they both lived at home, saved up money, got married. The day they got married, they moved into that house, and they have not moved ever since. So I think there's something about maybe that stability that gave me maybe the confidence to take risks. But at the same time, my dad was a union worker. He had a safe, career, safe job. My parents always preached that old sort of mentality of you work, get a good job with a good company that's going to take really great care of you, sort of like that antiquated paradigm that we know
Yeah.
today it isn't really reality.
Be a
But
company man. It's a good thing to do. It'll work out. Yeah.
yeah, but 40 years ago, when you're a kid and you're hearing these messages, it kind of gets drilled into you. So I definitely had that kind of unlearning that I needed to go through. So very stable from that standpoint. Did very well academically, but I was also a bit of a troublemaker. So I
Now
was
I know where I like you, Ryan. This is the good
yeah.
side. This is a good side.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a troublemaker in school, and had the same challenges where I was, captain of the soccer team. I was, played two musical instruments and, multiple sports, and I did acting and drama and musicals, and trying to figure out how to juggle all of it. Had a hard time with the stopping. Had a hard time saying, well, I want to do all of it. Like I'm at this buffet, and I want to try all of this. Like I
Yeah.
can't say no to things. And so I would, find myself burnt out. Like oftentimes in high school, for example, like in my teenage years, I would get home after everything, after, soccer game, after jazz band practice and whatever other things were going on. I'd get home at night, I'd eat dinner, 8, 9 o'clock at night, start my homework at 9, 10 o'clock at night. And just with the workload that I was doing, I'd be doing homework from 10 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning.
Wow.
My dad would be leaving for work at that time to do his night shift. And then I'd get an hour or two of sleep and then do a full day of school again and then just do it all over again. And like, I think now it's like insane. I can't imagine
But
having
back then
that.
it's what you did. So it's good that you have that self-awareness. And I'm curious, like for me, I found Tai Chi when I was 14, 15 years old. So from my
Mm,
weird side is I was actually a Tai Chi guy 25 years in. And
mm.
out in Asia, did you come across much of sort of the Taoism, the Tai Chi, the meditation, the mindfulness?
What's so interesting is that's actually what drew me to learn Chinese. So when I was studying at university, I was studying neuroscience, and I became really fascinated in learning the mechanism behind traditional Chinese medicine. And when you start going down that path, you quickly realize that if you want to study the texts in that space,
You
you
need
need
to
to be
learn
able to read
Mandarin.
and write
Yeah, yeah.
Mandarin. Exactly. You need to be able to read and write Chinese characters. So I started taking some classes in Chinese, and in the process became really fascinated with Chinese culture, Chinese language, Chinese history, everything that you're just describing from Taoism to Confucianism to Eastern philosophies to Eastern medicine to understanding acupuncture to understanding herbalism and moxibustion and just everything associated with that just took me down again one of these like deep rabbit holes. And in the process, kind of became more fascinated in Eastern culture and less so in the sort of the realm that originally brought me there. So, I think there's so many lessons that we can learn when we study a foreign language, and I'll maybe bring this point
Yeah.
home for our conversation. That I learned to appreciate the nuance of language in a deep way. And there's two levels to that. One is the nuance of the words that you're using, but the other is actually the way in which you articulate these words. And so I spent a lot of time really working on my ability to sound like a native to the extent that I could actually have a phone call with a native Chinese speaker and having never met them before, have a conversation over the phone and then meet later on. And for them to think that maybe I wasn't a native Chinese speaker, but I was definitely like American born Chinese or Hong Kong, like Chinese parents, just based on the way I could speak. And that was more of it's not a brag, it's just more of like I became really hyper tuned to how important it is to sound like your market,
Yeah.
to sound like the audience, the people that you are looking to make a connection with, to sound like one of the natives, so to speak. And I took that. That was a lifelong business lesson for me that made me realize the appreciation for the nuance of language, not just the words that you use, but the way in which you articulate those words. And so that's definitely something that had a profound impact on me in business, as a marketer, in my messaging, and just being really hyper tuned to that in a real meaningful way.
It's a beautiful insight, by the way. I can deeply appreciate it, and I can't do it, especially with
Mm,
Mandarin. The tones, the sounds. I
right.
know that I can't say seafood the correct way. I know there's differences. I know how to, like, I get it, but I can't do it. And I'm for my own sin, sort of hyper acuity stuff. And that's
Mm,
literally communication levels where, it's not just what's said, it's what's being said, it's the vibrations. There's a whole pheromonal side in neuropsychology that most aren't aware of. When we
right.
get into joint venture, strategic alliances, this asking questions, the art and science of asking the question. It's not always like, this is the script. It's the
Right.
tone and the spacing that gets lost. And all the time I'm talking with explaining British versus English. With the
Mm,
British communication, it isn't the words, it's the space inside of which that's having. It's not
mm,
even what's being said. The literal translation, I like your shirt, can mean I love your shirt or hate your shirt, depending on context, which
right.
is completely like foreign in some ways and makes sense in other ways. And so this sort of human communication bit, I think, is the really fun bit. And it's what I saw you doing live in London. And if you
Mm,
get a chance, do watch Ryan live, because you actually explain things with a deep depth of knowledge, but as
mm,
a low gradient. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like understandable without being condescending, without
mm.
being hello kiddies, this is what's going on, but also masterful distinction if you're there to pick it up. So that's really useful.
I appreciate that. It's, I think, something I work hard on. One of the things that really frustrates me a lot when you maybe learn from a thought leader or you hear an author speak or maybe someone that you respect is that there's an overemphasis on the sizzle and not enough on the steak.
Yeah.
Like very bloviated or just uh, deeply held convictions and opinions that aren't necessarily backed up with any sort of validation, any sort of data. And I think the real magic is both to be able to communicate with a sort of sense of poetic prose, whilst at the same time having the data and the science to back up the assertions that you make. And I think it's a rare combination, something that I aspire to be able to, okay, I believe this. Why do I believe this? And have the depth of knowledge to be able to back this up, and at the same time to be an interesting speaker in the way in which that these ideas are articulated so that they stick, so that they resonate. And these are lifelong pursuits. Like, it doesn't matter really if you're going to go into medicine, if you're going to go into business, to be a strong communicator, as I try to teach my boys, is a skill that will transcend AI. It doesn't matter where AI is headed. As long as we are human beings, we will have a need and a desire to communicate meaningfully, to persuade, to influence, to motivate, to inspire. These are skills that are timeless. And I think a lot about what are those timeless skills in this post AI world that
Yeah.
we're finding ourselves in right now. And the next generation will find themselves in an even deeper way. What are those timeless skills that will transcend the test of time?
And what you're doing there is sort of what I love. Like I've been teaching asking questions for like 30 years in
Mm,
weird different ways. Asking a good question is profound. Most
mm,
speakers, if you're listening to this, it will gift for you. Ask more questions when you talk. You do it really well. Most speakers will speak at a crowd for an hour and then go home and never
mm.
actually ask anything at all. And we have some questions to go through, but I'm enjoying, I guess, what I thought would happen, a real conversation. You know what I mean? Not the noisy stuff. I'm curious, like you mentioned your kids. What do you wish you could send back to that 10-year-old Ryan? I know the answer is everything's perfect, but like, is there anything you wish you'd learned younger? What you picked up? Like, what's a nugget you wish you could have had earlier on in the journey?
Don't be so afraid. Growing up, I was so fixated on getting A's, being an A student. And being an A student, it forces you
I
down this
was there. I'm jumping in. I was there. The problem is once you've had A's, anything that isn't a failure and it becomes a problem and you become, hey, Ryan, you're the smart guy, get everything right. Yeah, that becomes.
Exactly. So you take fewer risks because you can't lose that identity of being an A student. And, it's crushing to get a B or, God forbid, a C in school. So you take the safe route. And I think for me, I took the safe route, and it wasn't until I started my first business, and I was still fairly young. I was 24 years old, so it wasn't that I was, it
Is
wasn't
it the
like I was
Scrabble?
like
The Scrabble
50s.
jury was 24.
This is the Scrabble, so it's 20 between 24 and 26. I've got to kind of do the math back in my head. This is 2020,
Early
2006.
20s is good.
20,
We're
24,
friends.
25 is right when
Yeah.
right around then is when I made that move. But I went through this quarter life crisis, and Simon, I went through this burning of the ships experience, and I've done that a few times in my life where I found that if I'm going to do this, here's what I need to do. I need to quit my job. I need to donate everything that I own, which is what I did at the time in China. My wife was pursuing a PhD at HKU, Hong Kong University. I was based in Shanghai. She was based in Hong Kong. We
Wow,
had this
that's challenging.
crazy bi-country marriage where it was very like romantic at the time, where we'd be flying to see each other, and we'd rendezvous in Malaysia, or we'd meet up in some Southeast Asian city, and we'd see each other on the weekends, and talking all the time, obviously. But every time we met up, it was like this romantic getaway. So it was a very romantic period in our lives. But at the time, she was in grad school, and I'm living this posh life in Shanghai, making all this money. And I gave it all up, and we moved into student housing. And this was a tiny little
In
space
Hong Kong?
in Hong Kong. And she was still in grad school at the time. And I donated everything I owned except for what I could put in the suitcase on my flight from Shanghai to Hong Kong. We didn't have a whole lot of space. And I remember experiencing some of the most satisfying days of my life, because I could wake up and it was so liberating to have so few material possessions that were holding me back. I mean, I had a few shirts, and we were living on an island called Ma Wan in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is an archipelago made up of all these islands, even though Hong Kong Island is sort of best known, and there's Kowloon on the mainland side. But there are all these tiny little islands, some of which are only accessible by ferry. And we lived on one of these islands. So the only way to get to our island was on a ferry. And we had a tiny little grocery store, one or two local restaurants, and that was it. And I'd wake up in the morning at 5 a.m. and I'd just do laps around the island, thinking, just walking, first thing in the morning, just walking and thinking and figuring out what it is that I would do next. And I think living those lean years were transformative for me, because what it did, going back to this idea of fear, is it made me realize that most people in life are afraid to give up good in order to go after great. And I think what's incredibly liberating is that when you give it all up, when you let go of everything that has held you back, all the golden handcuffs that have you tethered to the life that you're living right now, and you release yourself from it, what you realize is how little you need to be incredibly fulfilled. And that for me was incredibly liberating, because it showed me that even if I lost everything tomorrow, that everything would be okay, that I'd be fine, I'd be happy in whatever it is that I had, even if it was a tiny apartment with one suitcase of possessions and really nothing else. And for me, when people ask this question, how do you develop more courage? How do you become more courageous? One of the things that I advise is to try this life on for size. And we can all do this, by the way. So if you're too afraid to burn the bridges, burn the ships, and do this for yourself, do this for an experiment. Take 30 days. Find yourself the smallest, cheapest Airbnb in the destination that you want to spend some time with. Pack one suitcase of stuff. That's it, nothing else. And put yourself in that space for 30 days. You can't bring anything that doesn't fit in that suitcase. And for me, I had a laptop computer, an internet connection, and a library card, and that was all I needed to start my business. And so the ramen noodle season of life, when you're living cheap and simply, if you didn't have the opportunity to experience it as a younger man or a younger woman, I'd encourage you to try that out as a 30-day experiment and see what it does for your willingness to take risks and to live a life that's true to yourself.
You're doing what happened in London, Ryan. I love you for this, and I hate you for this. And it's like, if I'd heard this when I was 15, I'm 48 in February, and so true. And I've had these moments where I've been away from everything, happier without any stuff, and then you come back and the stuff gets in the way. And we know this. It's not the minimalism thing. It's not that. It's just when you actually wake up and there's nothing you have to do but be that day and be with it, because there isn't this project and this phone call. And how easy it is to start a new domain name project these days. Buy domain name, WordPress site up, new email list. It's so quick to start them, but they become who you are, and it sort of carries on. You know what I mean? So really fascinating about the fear, and such a vital bit that I think so many of us today are dealing with. Let's not go into too much politics, but the world's in a really fascinating place. Like, I wrote Chaos to Clarity a few years ago. I predicted some chaos. Even now I'm going, didn't see this stuff happening, so that fear of being okay. And we can touch later on the money side, because I think it's one of those things you understand how to move the needle with sales really well, right? You've got to, right? And I know some people that 100% the material stuff is no longer valuable. You and I have had fancy meals, not fancy meals. Sometimes the simplest, a tomato from the garden is better than the fancy restaurant stuff. But there's, for me, the human piece, when people get back to that real zero of, I am by myself, dark night of the soul, the partner's gone, business is gone. When that's gone, then it's what matters. And I'm just curious for you, I love how you had that partner through that challenge, clearly sort of stayed with it, right? If somebody hasn't got that other support, either the cash flow or the sort of the family or friend, and I've actually got I run a charity, Ryan, and somebody a few days ago was literally messaging the stuff that makes your heart break, not because she's can't be helped, because she got herself in that frame of there's nobody on my side. And it's like, this isn't true. This is a person who, by the way, been in television, been in movies, but that weird cash flow world we live in today, where you can earn good money, but throw in some kids and some other stuff, it gets strange. So there's a lot of questions there. Sorry about that. But the fear is such a vital thing. And, me for myself, that A-list person who has challenges, you don't admit it to the market, right? It's the very old American way, like, everything's great. How are you feeling? Life's awesome. Nobody tells, actually, it's been a bad day. What were you left with there out of my yabbering? You're good at this.
A few thoughts show up for me, for sure. So one, I think there's this popular notion that most people have a fear of failure. I actually believe that it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think most people have a fear of being seen as a failure. We're not
100%.
afraid of failing. We're afraid of other people seeing us fail and what that's going to do to our place in the social hierarchy. Are we going to be rejected from the group? Are we going to be put into the other? Are we going to be ostracized and thrown out of whatever circles we find ourselves in, where having social currency is important to us? And that's different for all of us, and the groups are going to be unique to you. So I think that's the first thing that shows up for me. Second thing that shows up for me is that everything that we're talking about right here, there are few things in life that represent objective reality. So gravity is objective reality, whether or not you believe in it or not. But most of what we're talking about here is essentially a version of a story that we decide to believe in. And I've learned that you can change the story and you can change the meaning that you ascribe to something happening in your life. Most people choose to either be the victim or the hero of their life. It's a choice that we make, and that's important. It is a choice. And like any choice, it's a choice that you can choose to change. So if you find yourself in a place where you're saying, I have nobody around me, why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? You can shift the story you're telling. You can shift the questions, to your point about the power of questions that you ask yourself.
Yeah.
So instead of asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Maybe the question to ask yourself is, what might I learn from this? What opportunity is this presenting? How am I growing from this experience? Just these subtle shifts in the questions that we pose to ourselves when we're having this self-talk can make all the difference in the world, and it can transform the story that you believe as being one that you are the victim of this story to one that you are the hero. That these challenges were set in front of you to test your fortitude, to test how badly you want it. That maybe you're closer to what you're going after than you think you are, but it takes just one more step. That's a belief. That's neither true nor not true. That's just a subjective reality that you have the opportunity to choose for yourself. So those are two things that show up for me. This idea of failure versus being seen as a failure, and this idea that we are all in a position to choose the story that we want to believe.
Love it. And this is when I met you, like sort of kindred sort of brothers in whatever you call this question skill thing. It's kind of fun and so good. These key questions that alter our futures, very
Mm,
subtle sometimes, that 1 degree changing. You touched on this sort of the resetting, right? I love this pause.reset. For me, one of my not escapes, but the moments of doing it has been books and movies.
mm.
Especially, weird movies, weird books out of nowhere, Vil, can change the mood, change the mindset. I'm curious, any books and movies that have really been there for you on the journey?
Yeah, it's interesting when you asked me this question in preparation for this conversation. It's funny. I literally, as we talked about before jumping on this conversation, just getting back from hiking the Grand Canyon with my eldest son. And it's a experience that I'll remember for the rest of my life. And it ties back to an important question that I think is really important to reflect on. And I'll give you an answer. It's a movie, by the way. Um, there's a question that I invite most people that I work with to answer before we begin doing deep work together. And it is, what are you optimizing for in your life? What are you optimizing for right now? Because life is just a series of trade-offs. You can't have everything that you want, but you can have anything you want. You just have to decide what you're willing to give up for that. And so for me, what I'm optimizing for is very simple. I've got two boys who are at an age where I have got a few years left with them at home before they move out.
Yeah.
Every decision that I'm making in business in my life is, to paraphrase Thoreau, is to suck the marrow out of this season of life. And for example, hiking the Grand Canyon together to be able to see the sun rise and the sun set over the Grand Canyon is a vision in my mind that I will have for the rest of my life. And coming back from that trip, on the way home, just the other day, we watched a movie together on the plane that is a deep movie. And I've seen it multiple times, but it was just a reminder of why this movie is so powerful. And that movie is Interstellar. And there's
Yeah.
so many elements to that movie. I mean, the soundtrack is incredible. I'm watching this movie next to my firstborn son, and I'm thinking about him through the character Murphy, the main protagonist in the film, Matthew McConaughey's daughter in the film, and how just the multi-generational impact we have on young people in our life, where maybe we think of ourselves as the hero, as Matthew McConaughey thought that he was going to be the revered hero for saving humanity. But the reality is, it was his daughter and the choices that he made and the sacrifices that he made. And it just reminded me of the ripple effect of the impact that we can have in the world. A single conversation like this one right here, maybe overheard by someone, some word, some sentence, some phrase, can have such an impact on someone that it changes the trajectory of their life, and then in turn changes the trajectory of the human race. And I think at the end of the day, to paraphrase our dear friend, my business partner, Daniel Priestley, we're all trying to make a dent, our little impact to better the human race, right? To better civilization, to do something that leaves a positive mark in the world, whether it's, one starfish in a vast sea of ocean life, or changing the world in a much bigger way. And so for me, Interstellar reminded me of that, and that core human desire that we have to leave the world a better place than what we found it when we first arrived here.
And I love that for so many reasons. And I'm going to not give a gift back. I think I mentioned the live when I was with you. I've been driven since 2002. Really the weekend of 9/11 sort of kicked this off, seeing the impact of a single question as it ripples
Mm.
around the world. And especially if nobody ever know you asked it. I think you and I are driven by, it doesn't really matter they know who you and I are if the good gets done. There's clearly
Exactly.
how do we get paid, but generally it's the be behind the scenes, not public, right? It's that choice. And there is this possibility of making the difference for who we are as humanity, not in some woo-woo way, but as you can have food and water handled, you can be physically safe. There is no really need for that not to shift, but it's the mindset shift, this fear to let go of, I loved how you said that, the sort of letting go of good to go after great. And that isn't some woo-woo phrase. Most people are kind of okay-ish. They're not
Right.
like life is awesome. And it's mind boggling. This includes millionaires, billionaires, celebrities. It's most people aren't actually okay pretending to be in this world. It's really fascinating. The bit again, what I saw live with you was bringing that reality to it, but without it going, I'm being authentic now. It's just actually being. And then, sadly, I think until you've gone to the heavy stuff, you don't always get that. For me, it's stomach surgery. 2, 3 years ago, stomach got cut out. I'm okay, but it wasn't one of those, this will be easy. It was like, no, this is a fundamental shift and change. And thank you for bringing that up. And Dan, come on the show. He's been hiding from the show for a while. I'm kidding. But if we can get Dan on, he's a busy guy. Love Dan loads. And we touched on, I think, really sort of this collaborative aspect for life and business, this sort of communication, right? Talking to ourselves, asking questions help, but really it's others. And I'm just curious, is it people that have got you through the hard times? Like we all have it, entrepreneurs, right? Or challenging times. What was the thing that got you through your biggest sort of pause, stop, reset shifts? What was the thing? How did you get through? What navigated the dark nights of the soul for you?
I'm not going to lie. I'm incredibly fortunate to have in my wife an incredibly supportive partner. I think in every one of these major resets that I've had in my life, the people closest to me, my parents, my friends, had this reaction. Are you crazy? Like, when I told people, yeah, I remember having a conversation with a colleague in Shanghai as I'm leaving this career. I'm on this trajectory where if I keep doing what I'm doing, I will be certainly the country manager. And I was working for AIG, which American International Group, one of the biggest financial institutions in the world. As a bilingual Chinese English speaker on the trajectory that I was on, most likely would be on a path to be the CEO of AIG China at some point, and probably in time running Asia for the company. Like that's where I saw myself.
I used to audit AIG in the UK. This was a big thing. This is like a Goldman. This is a extremely small but huge world. Yeah.
And so, but then I saw my boss, who was in that position, who I was sort of his protege, and I realized like that was not the life that I wanted to live. And this is nothing against my boss. I just could see his life. I saw like that will be me in 30 years if I keep on the path that I'm on. As a 25-year-old, by the time that I'm 50, 55, I will be in his position. And do I really want that to be my life's work? So I think for me, it was about really reflecting early on that experience, and and making a decision to shift. One of the things that I've learned in my career, it's something I talk about in my next book that I'm working on right now. That will be really a culmination of a lot of this work. Is we're all faced at times in our life with tough decisions. And I just got back from this trip with my son, and it was a father-son rite of passage trip. And one of the things that we spent time exploring was, what does it mean to be a man? What is that? What does it mean?
Huge question, especially today. What does it mean? It's a great question, challenging. I don't know. I jumped in. Sorry. Like it's a good and challenging question.
It's a deep question, and I don't know that there's a right answer or an only answer, but I believe when I was posed with this question, again, talking about the power of questions, the answer that showed up for me was that, and this is not a complete definition, but it's part of the definition for me, is to do the right thing, even when the right thing is the hard thing. And I think we're faced with hard decisions every day in business, in life, and there is the road less traveled. And I believe taking the road less traveled does make all the difference, to paraphrase and quote Robert Frost. So for me, the phrase that I spent a lot of time exploring in my forthcoming book is this idea of following the contrarian voice of your heart. Learning to listen to that voice, to recognize that voice, even if that voice is just a whisper. And for me, it's guided me not only in life, but it's guided me in business. It's guided me in business when much of the world is headed in this direction, like we talked about in London, to zig when others zag.
Yeah.
The rest of the world goes right. Maybe it makes sense to take the path over here. Maybe it makes sense to do things a little bit differently. Now that's increasingly challenging because we find ourselves in these echo chambers and we have this false sense of reality when we're distorted by living life through proxy, through abstraction, through experiencing it through social media and the echo chambers that presents to us, where we think that this is the only way. And we have all these biases in our brain, and yet we know in our heart that maybe that's not the right path, or at least the right path for us. It's not the right path for me. And having that courage to not only listen to that voice, but to follow that voice, I think is really the secret to a life worth living. So as I think about the lessons that I'm trying to instill in my boys and pass along to them, this is one of them. As boys who are becoming men, to learn how to listen to that contrarian voice of your heart. When there's a group that's doing something that you know is not right, to listen to that, to listen to that voice and to take action based on those convictions. And you know, I'm forgetting the original question, but that's what shows up for me in this idea of you know, pursuing that in life.
No, it's really, really wise. And I think many people have got so muddled about what that voice is, especially when, again, it's sort of the question I want to ask you, given your marketing background, right? If somebody is here going, I can't pay the rent this month, cash is screwed, nothing's working, quote unquote, how do they reset? But so much, the echo chamber is only clear if you know what that is. And if you aren't aware of how much it's filtered and valued, and somebody gives you a frame that is very clearly spoken, but it's nonsense, but they haven't got that sort of science brain to unpack it. Because it takes a lot these days, because unfortunately, people like yourself and others validly have taught the power of asking questions in these frameworks that then people have taken, then taught others, and then taught others, but they've forgotten that core essence of, and help people. They've actually, or worse, they buy their own BS. They buy their Kool-Aid that then get replicated out. And we've seen this, so many of these like billion-dollar companies that then implode, and you're like, it was never actually working. And everybody goes, I thought it was going to work. So I'm talking around it. I love what you shared. I'm just curious with the time we've got, if somebody is going, I want to reset, especially in sort of the marketing, the financy, the cash split, I do believe there is that trust, the instinct, the unexpected connection. I'm a big believer in discovering these key connections for ourselves, right? And finding those voices that really help at the right time. And there is something there for me about that. But I'm curious for you, if they're listening in, want to reset, where should they start, apart from read the new book, which is coming out soon?
I would say the phrase that comes to mind is, the faster you get to the truth, the faster you get to the cash.
Wow.
And that shows up in a number of different contexts. That shows up in a one-on-one conversation where you're trying to understand what's the real problem that this individual is looking to solve, that this business is looking to solve, and why hasn't that problem been solved at this point? What's really going on? In a marketing context, it's asking open-ended questions to uncover the natural consumer language that's being used to describe the pain, the emotion that someone is experiencing that's holding them back from accomplishing what they want to accomplish in life and the problem that they're looking to solve. And then resisting the temptation to sanitize the language by saying, okay, I know exactly what you mean. I'm going to throw this in AI and have AI Bayesify this language so that I can oversimplify it. No, it's the warts and all, it's the mistakes and all, it's the imperfections in the bending of the hat that make it real. Because what's real is rare, and what's rare is valuable. So in business, truth, reality, these are the things that you need to pursue. Not chasing some trend, not jumping on some bandwagon. As I described to my kids, there are no shortcuts in life. There are no shortcuts in business. There are only long cuts in disguise. And if you try to take one of these shortcuts, I can tell you're going to circle back to the beginning and said, okay, so if I just put some hard work in, figure out what people actually want and give it to them, as hard as that may be, that's really all that business is about. That's the truth right there. Find out what people want and give it to them. The challenge, of course, is sticking with it long enough and having the discipline to do that and not chase some crypto scam, not chase some AI quick path to cash. Focus on the fundamentals. There are no shortcuts in life. Only long cuts in disguise.
Love it. We've got some real gems. I know you've got to wrap up for the family and everything else. If someone wants to follow you, get in touch with your newsletter, learn about the new books and things, where is the best place for them to go today?
Best place to go is thedigitalcontrarian.com. And the reason for that is a weekly newsletter that I personally write by hand. So talking about the road less traveled, when I saw the enthusiasm and irrational exuberance around AI generated content reaching a fever pitch, I asked myself, what if I did the complete opposite? Instead of trying to shortcut the amount of time it takes to write a weekly newsletter by relying on AI, what if I write the newsletter myself by hand every single week? What if I take an entire day, 12 to 14 hours to deeply research, deeply think through the ideas that are being shared there? Could I perhaps create a category of one? And what I'd love to invite anyone who's listening to this or watching this right now to do is to check it out at thedigitalcontrarian.com. And we go much, much deeper on some of the ideas that we've explored here today and many more.
And my experience of it generally, I read it, I enjoy it, it's good content. And what I love about it, you're not doing the bait and switch most of our lovely friends do of just join this, there's no sell. Like, you make offers occasionally, but it really isn't that. It's good content given, because thankfully you're in a place where you're not having to make $100 to pay the rent this week, right? You're sort of in that good place. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens as the tools you're bringing with Score and with Dan help others entrepreneurs more. Any other guests you think should be great guests, let us know. And I want to give you the sort of passing thought, right? They're there going, that guy Ryan was clever, he said. What's your final wisdom thought to wrap up the show today?
What I would say is this, in business, you don't have to get it perfect. You just have to get it going. And the best time to get it going is right here, right now, today. So what I would encourage anyone, if you're watching this or listening to this right now, take one idea that really resonates with you. You can discard all the rest. One idea that's really sticking with you right now, that's really resonating with you, and put it into action today while you have energy, while you have momentum, and take advantage of this moment in time.
I love that. Ryan, thank you so much. And thank you to your wife and your kid letting us borrow you for this sort of hour today. I hope they watch us in the future. And if you watch this and you get value and you've taken action and you bump into Ryan, let him know, because I know that you really care when others take impact on what you share, right? So look forward to learning more at the new stuff coming soon, zigging when you zag. And Ryan, keep being you and sharing what you do, because it really helps people. Thank you so much for doing the show today. And we'll see you next time for Pause, Stop, Reset.